Hi everybody, I'm Jordan Rolfus from Beagle Rampant Productions, and if you guys know anything about me, you'll know that my three biggest fandoms are Wagner, Tim Burton, and Metroid. It's always interesting whenever I go to a convention because you see plenty of Tim Burton and Metroid things and cosplayers running around, but you never see any Wagner cosplayers, so that might be a project I'll have to work on in the coming year, so we'll see where the year takes us on that, but today we are actually here to discuss Metroid. A brand new Metroid game was released on the Nintendo Switch this past October called Metroid Dread. And I myself just got done finishing up the game and beating it, and I got the 100%, all of the items and collectibles, so I'm ready to go ahead and discuss the game and give a little bit of a review here. And I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as I humanly can, which is kind of interesting because the game came out in October, so the die-hard Metroid fans have probably already beaten it multiple times, and they could appreciate a sort of spoilerish discussion on the intricacies of the game's plot, and the people who were on the fence about the game probably unwrapped it for the holidays that we just celebrated, so they've already purchased the game, so a review isn't going to be too terribly helpful for them, so I have once again made a video that appeals to nobody. But hey, target audience analysis, that's for big media corporations and those successful YouTubers, so obviously I'm not going to play those sorts of games around this channel, but regardless, we are going to enjoy some good old-fashioned Metroid content. I love gabbing about Metroid. It's one of my three biggest fandoms, so sit back, relax, we're going to have a good time with this video. So one of the most interesting aspects of Metroid Dread is the excruciatingly long development process the game underwent. Let me set the scene for you guys. It's the mid-2000s. I am an overweight high school filled with acne and hormones, and it's a really exciting time to be a Metroid fan, because we had the release of Metroid Fusion, Metroid Zero Mission, and the Metroid Prime games. It seemed like everywhere you were turning, a new Metroid game was being released, so this was a really great time to be a part of the Metroid fandom. And in 2005, we had an announcement that there was going to be a new game for the Nintendo DS called Metroid Dread, and it was going to play a lot like Super Metroid. And honestly, those were all the details we had about the game. We didn't really hear much out of the project until the year 2007. In 2007, I'm getting ready to graduate high school, and Metroid Prime 3 is released on the Nintendo Wii. In the Pirate Homeworld, there are environmental scans that indicate Metroid Project Dread is nearing completion. And if you scan the other end of the environment, it'll say that the Metroid Project Dread has ended in failure. And game director Mark Pancini mentioned that, okay, this was just kind of a coincidence. We weren't really collaborating with the team that was developing Metroid Dread. It was just sort of a happenstance accident there. But one of the game designers, Mike Wiki, mentioned that, okay, it was kind of a straight-up joke. I guess the team at Retro Studios knew that the development of Metroid Dread maybe wasn't going as well as it could have, so they kind of tossed in a little sarcastic wink and a nod there. And incidentally, in the Japanese release of Metroid Prime 3, it does not refer to Metroid Project Dread, but rather a Dread-class turret. So I myself, when I ran into that, I kind of thought, ooh, maybe Metroid Dread is going to happen. It had been a few years since we had any sort of news about the project, and when I ran into that scan when I played Metroid Prime 3, I thought, okay, maybe there's some hope for the project. And then silence out of the project. In 2010, Metroid Other M was released, and Other M is one of those games that have charged opinions, depending on who you ask. It's a game that definitely merits its own video, and I really should get to work on that, but I do remember playing Other M and thinking, they scrapped Metroid Dread for this? I was starting to lose faith that I would ever get to play Metroid Dread, and at this juncture, I think a lot of gamers were starting to believe that Metroid Dread wasn't going to happen. It was just one of those things you heard about that don't go anywhere. Video gaming is an industry where that happens a lot. An idea gets bounced around, but it doesn't really go into fruition. And in 2010, after playing Metroid Other M, I kind of thought that Dread was going to be one of those projects as well. And then we move on to the Wii U era. The Wii U era was a very sad time to be a Metroid fan. The only release we had during the Wii U's life cycle related to Metroid was the insulting Metroid Prime Federation Force. I remember hearing that E3 announcement and I was utterly disappointed, and by this juncture, Federation Force was announced in 2015. And Other M was released in 2010. So we had 5 years of no news related to Metroid. And then this disastrous little thing for the 3DS was announced. I myself was starting to lose hope for the series itself. So I had abandoned the hope that Metroid Dread would ever be released. And the series itself was seeming to be in a very dark place with the release of Federation Force. But the year 2017 seemed to mark a bit of a paradigm shift for Nintendo. They had released the Nintendo Switch in March of that year, and the Nintendo E3 conference in June of 2017 announced a remake of Metroid 2: The Return of Samus. This remake was going to be called Samus Returns, and yes, I myself get the titles of those games confused as well. Return of Samus was the original on the Game Boy, and Samus Returns is the 3DS release in 2017. The developers in charge of making Samus Returns for the 3DS was a Spain-based company called Mercury Steam, and it was announced in June of 2017, and then it was released just a few months later. So this was really exciting news for us Metroid fans. I myself was starting to get a little more faith that the series was going to be in a very good place moving forward. But I didn't necessarily believe that Metroid Dread was ever going to happen because we had not had any sort of news related to Metroid Dread. It had been radio silence since 2007, so 10 years of radio silence on a project, you kind of think that maybe the thing isn't going to happen. And then, in June of 2021, I remember this day vividly. I come home from work, I make myself some dinner, and I sit down and I watch Nintendo's E3 announcements. And there is Metroid Dread. I leaped up from my seat and spilled my dinner everywhere. I'm still trying to find those pizza crusts. The smell's kind of cluing me into where they might be, but we'll take care of that later. Metroid Dread was real and happening, and it was being developed by Mercury Steam, the same company that did such a great job with Samus Returns. So this was exciting. The thing that you thought wasn't actually going to exist actually does exist. It's kind of like the government releasing that alien they had captured in Area 51 for the past few decades. It was that sort of experience there. And the game was going to be released in October of 2021. That was even better, because usually when you have a huge announcement like that, it's usually a few years before the project happens, and enough time for it to end up getting canceled again. But no, this thing was real, and it was happening. And I feel good about being a Metroid fan again. We're kind of a long ways away from the dark ages of the Wii U era. This is, once again, a good time to be a Metroid fan. And to put it all in perspective, so we went from me being in high school to graduating high school to me going through college to me traveling the world and hitting every single continent, and then to me turning into whatever this monstrosity is before you right now, all throughout the development cycle of Metroid Dread. So this took forever for the game to be completed and worked out. And the main auteur behind the Metroid series, Yoshio Sakamoto, actually uploaded a video to Nintendo's YouTube page detailing the long development process of Metroid Dread, and he mostly cited technological limitations as the reason for not having the game prepared and released on the previous systems. So, yeah, let's take a look now and see, is Metroid Dread worth the wait? Was Sakamoto wise in delaying the project and waiting to get it just the way he wanted? So I called Samus Returns a masterpiece. That means when talking about Metroid Dread, I'm going to have to call it something better than a masterpiece. The basic premise of the game is that the deadly X-parasite, which threatens the safety of the entire galaxy, is detected on the mysterious planet ZDR. The Galactic Federation sent recon robots known as the Extraplanetary Multi-Form Mobile Investigators, also known as the EMMIs. Does EMMI stand for Extraplanetary Multiform Mobile Investigators, or does it stand for Elephants Must Make Ink Blots? And, of course, all contact with these robots is lost. And now it's up to the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy, Samus Aran, to explore ZDR, and as she is the only one with immunity to the X-parasite, she's the only one that stands a penguin's chance in hell of solving this problem for the Federation. And a lot of this plot stuff that I said may not make a whole lot of sense to you guys who may not be familiar with Metroid. This is because Metroid Dread is Metroid 5, the 5th game in the original story arc that started way back in 1986. The most recent entry we had in this particular story arc was Metroid Fusion, Metroid 4, which was released back in 2002. So it's been 19 years between installments in the story arc, so even if you are familiar with Metroid and know the basics, this still may be a lot to take in because we had such a long gap in between entries within the story arc there. And Sakamoto, again, mentions that a little bit in his developer diary. One thing that I really love about Metroid Dread is that it deals significantly with the Chozo. And the Chozo are the race of bird people that raised the young Samus after she was orphaned on the space colony. They took her in and raised her and brought her up in all the really cool Chozo ways, and you even get to hear Samus speak some Chozo in the game, and it's pretty groovy. And we even have an edgelord Chozo named Ravenbeak. Ravenbeak was the name I used to dance under when I worked at that one club. They had to close that club down because old Ravenbeak just couldn't keep the building afloat there, but that's a whole nother story there. And we also have another interesting character, Samus's navigation computer known as Adam. And Adam is exceedingly helpful in telling you where to go and what to do and how to progress through the game. If you're stuck, Adam will usually help you out and point you in the right direction there, but Adam Malkovich was Samus's former commanding officer when she worked in the military, and he ultimately had to sacrifice himself to save the galaxy from being infested by Metroids. The Metroid is the big, scary, parasitic organism that was developed by the Chozo to combat the X-Parasite. And at the end of Metroid Fusion, Samus realizes that her navigational computer has Adam Malkovich's consciousness uploaded. And it's really touching and really sweet, but also I have a thing throughout a lot of the Metroid series when talking about Adam. I kind of think Adam is a better guy than he actually comes off. It's sort of like there's the Adam Malkovich that I have in my head, and then there's the actual Adam Malkovich who just shoots Samus in the back with an ice beam.
I'm sorry for getting a little rough with you.
It seemed like maybe actual Adam was kind of a jerk face, but I love the idea that he stands for. I love the idea that he stands for a federation dedicated to peace and looking at the bigger picture of things. That's what I like about Adam Malkovich. And in Metroid Dread, when you consult with Adam, you get a grim, monotone, heartless, computerized voice. There is nothing human about the voice of Adam in Metroid Dread.
One final thing. Underground interference is preventing radio transmissions. Check in with me at any network stations you find.
This is one thing that's kind of detailed over here in the deluxe edition of Metroid Dread. Yeah, I couldn't get this when the game was initially released, because Melvin and the GitHub robots were beating me out on it, but Santa Claus knows how to take care of Melvin, so in this deluxe edition, there's a little sampling of artwork that shows Adam as a colorless, expressionless face, sort of trapped in the cyber sphere, and it's heartbreaking to see a man who was so dedicated to the peace and stability of the galaxy be reduced to this mechanical, passionless thing. And Samus had a good deal of passion for Adam throughout the events of Other M and Metroid Fusion. To put this in perspective as well, Super Metroid was Metroid 3, released in 1994, and Metroid Fusion was Metroid 4, released in 2002, and Other M is kind of in between those, released in 2010. Other M kind of is a gap between Metroid 3 and Metroid 4, so that's sort of where a lot of that information comes timeline-wise. And of course, Metroid Dread is Metroid 5, released after Fusion. And fans of the Metroid series will be glad to see that Kraid makes an appearance in Metroid Dread. Always good to see Kraid, ask him how the wife and kids are doing, ask if he ever got that really annoying wart removed. Kraid, always good to see you, buddy. Don't be a stranger, we love having you here. Yoshio Sakamoto's developer diary mentions that newcomers will be able to just jump right on in and enjoy Metroid Dread. To an extent, I do agree with that. But a lot of the imagery and a lot of the plot isn't going to have that sort of oomph factor if you haven't played the rest of the Metroid games. Nintendo does a good enough job of explaining the basics of the story arc, the original story arc starting in 1986. They do a fine enough job with that, but it doesn't go into the intricacies of Adam Malkovich and Samus and Adam's relationship and why Adam being forced in this computerized box is such a tragic sort of image. So, yeah, you can definitely get in there and enjoy Metroid Dread, but you're going to miss out of a lot of the heavy implications of the plot. I would recommend pretty much playing all of, Metroid or Zero Mission, and then Samus Returns, Super Metroid, Other M, Fusion, and then Dread. So have Dread be your 6th game to really get the oomph of the plot, but in terms of gameplay, though, longtime Metroid fans know that Metroid is a series about action platforming and exploration, and newcomers are going to be able to jump right on in there. The controls are very easy to learn, but a little bit difficult to master. In my opinion, that's exactly how a video game should be. Easy to learn, hard to master. That's the perfect balance right there. And we have this term running around called Metroidvania, and we haven't had too many 2D Metroid games being released lately, so the actual Metroid portion of Metroidvania might be lost on some people who are just getting into that style of gaming, and I myself never really liked the term Metroidvania. It's a combination of the Metroid series and the Castlevania series, and I myself think the exploration just works very differently in Castlevania, so lumping it in with Metroid maybe takes out a really important element, but if you've heard the term Metroidvania and you like Metroidvania sorts of games, obviously, this is a Metroid game. It's going to deliver on the Metroidvania style, and Metroid Dread delivers the gameplay beautifully. The controls are fantastic and responsive. I maybe wish that they wouldn't use the shoulder buttons as much as they do, but that's a nitpicky sort of criticism. The game controls and feels exactly like how it should. Everything about exploring the planet ZDR is utterly satisfying. And the Aeon abilities that were introduced in Samus Returns on the 3DS make a reappearance here in Dread, but they are so much better. They are much easier to comprehend, they are much easier to work out and manage, it's way less confusing, so the Aeon abilities have definitely been refined, and it's a much better experience than what we saw in the 3DS version, and the 3DS version wasn't bad either, so yeah, that kind of indicates how much Mercury Steam improved the mechanics and the overall gameplay here for Dread. And of course, one of the big selling points of Metroid Dread was the fact that the Emmy robots pursue you relentlessly, and I mean they pursue you relentlessly. It's like the manager of Bob Evans when they realize you forgot your wallet. They are that ruthless when it comes down to finding you and getting some justice there. There is a hardcore element of stealth with Metroid Dread, but like the stealth elements we saw with Metroid Zero Mission, the stealth components of Dread are very forgiving, and if the Emmy robot gets you, it'll start you out right in front of the Emmy zone. And yes, the Emmy just sort of patrols one little area, so it's not like you're constantly being pursued throughout the whole game. It's very understanding and forgiving, but yet it is challenging, and I do run away from those Emmys just like how I run away from Bob Evans managers when I conveniently forget my wallet. And sometimes, yes, the Emmy robot is going to go ahead and capture you, and you have a very small chance of breaking free. The game, I think, references that you have about a 2% chance of breaking free from the Emmys once they catch you, and I think that number is actually right. I kept track, and it did factor out about only 2% of every capture I was able to avoid. So, yeah, the Emmys are not messing around, but it's very doable. It's not frustrating, which is something I usually have with stealth games. So, Metroid Dread nails stealth and dread when you are being relentlessly pursued by these Emmy robots, and they are merciless. Woo boy! And while I really do love the gameplay of Metroid Dread, I do have my criticisms. I'm a reviewer. Of course I have to have criticisms. I gotta bitch about something, you know? The speed booster controls are a little wonky in this game, and when it comes time to use the Shine Spark, it gets even wonkier, and I have given Samus more than one concussion. I don't think she's able to do simple math anymore after I'm done playing this game and making her Shine Spark all over the place. And while I do like that the pitfall traps actually have a way around them in this game, the cross-bomb power-up is really not all that refined, and it doesn't work as beautifully as I would like it to. It's kind of hard to control when you're just going to launch a regular bomb or a cross-bomb. The cross-bomb power-up, while I appreciate that it can get you through the pitfall traps, I feel like it maybe needed some more fine-tuning there. And while the exploration elements are done very beautifully, the exploration is beautiful in Metroid Dread, I did notice a little bit of a linear pattern developing. There would be a lot of times you would explore a little bit of an area, run into a block, oh, I need a power-up to go any further in this area. You keep going around, you find the next area, you can explore a little bit of the next area until you get that one power-up, then you go back to the other area, and you're able to progress through. It's not a huge problem or a criticism, and it's not even like the game plays exactly like that all of the time, but I did notice that pattern slightly develop, ever so slightly develop, so that is maybe a minor strike against Metroid Dread. And the load times. My God, these load times are insanely long. They're not as bad as the load times that we've seen on the original Metroid release for the Famicom Disk System, but wow. I was able to go ahead and listen to Julianne Hough's entire Christmas album, and then come back and get some more load time action. That's how long these load times are. So I can maybe see why Sakamoto wasn't too keen on releasing this game on some of the previous consoles, because you would die of old age before these load times actually finished. These are insane load times for Metroid Dread. Overall, though, my criticisms of the game are fairly minor compared to the really amazing experience you're going to have with Metroid Dread. And of course, Metroid Dread incorporates amiibos, and special amiibos were released for the game, and if you scan any of the Samus amiibos, you'll get extra energy, and if you scan any of the villains, you'll get extra ammo. You can even scan amiibos during the boss battles for some power-ups, and you can only use them once a day, though, so you can't exactly spam amiibos to get unlimited ammo and energy, but they can definitely help you out in a pinch, and you might run into some pinches in this game, because it's a very challenging and satisfying experience. And if you use a non-Metroid amiibo, it's not going to recognize it and wonder, why are you trying to use an Animal Crossing amiibo here, dumbass? So, yeah, overall, the amiibos, they're incorporated nicely, but it's certainly not a pay-to-win sort of scenario here. Going on to the atmosphere of the game. Atmosphere has always been a vital component of the Metroid series, and Metroid Dread nails the atmosphere beautifully. The visuals are impressive and stunning. The game looks exactly like how it should. There's really nothing for me to criticize in terms of the game's visuals. It looks great, and everything feels very natural, and exploring this planet is really incredible and involved. In fact, it really feels like at times that one area of ZDR is almost as big as one of the older games in their entirety. This is such a massive planet with multiple areas to explore. You are not going to get bored exploring ZDR. They have nailed the atmosphere and the exploration elements here. We have several different areas for you to explore. There's Ataria, the underground area where the game begins. Kataris, the geothermal area. the Tech Research Center of Dairon, the aquatic area of Burenia, the jungle zone of Gavaron, and the Chozo sanctuaries of Ferrania and Elun. And let me tell you guys, I really love the way Elun looks. Like, Elun is kind of my aesthetic here. I kind of want to call a contractor and ask them to make my house look like the imagery you see in Elun. And then I'll have to call the Mafia and get a loan to pay for that, but that's something I'll work out later on in the coming months there. But overall, though, the game looks great. I love that we have big, honkin' Chozo statues. I love me some cool Chozo imagery. Metroid Dread delivers on that, so that was some good, satisfying sugar there. And an important part of atmosphere is music. And I gotta say, the music in Metroid Dread is amazing. And that is kind of a heavy-handed insult coming from me. Not saying that the music is bad in Metroid Dread, no, I just said it was amazing, but usually the music in the Metroid series is transcendently brilliant. In some of the previous Metroid games, I have just sort of lost track of what I was doing and just sort of fell into a meditative and a prayerful sort of state, just listening to the music and enjoying the environment, and I actually forgot to play the game. I actually don't have the song Happy Birthday sung to me. We just listen to the Lower Norfair theme from Super Metroid. That's how much the music of the Metroid series means to me. It's a huge integral part of my being here. So here, amazing doesn't quite fit the insanely high bar that I have set for the Metroid series, and the music genius of Kenji Yamamoto, he's only listed as the music director for the game. The actual composers were Soshi Abe and Sayako Doi, who you may remember from Animal Crossing New Horizons. So it went from Animal Crossing to Metroid, always a good time, and they did a really good job with the music. I'm not slamming the music. I'm just saying, you know, I got Wagner, and I got Kenji Yamamoto. The music we've seen in the past blew me away, and the music we have here in Dread is really good. And really good isn't exactly blow me away, but I can't really criticize it in any real way, shape, or form there. So overall, Metroid Dread, I said it was better than a masterpiece, and it probably ranks within some of my top favorite games that I've ever played. And the big question, though, was it worth the wait? I think it probably was, because when you look at some of the things that the game requires you to do, and in terms of the graphic prowess that the game required, I don't think the DS, the Wii, the Wii U, or the 3DS really would have been able to handle that. Whew, those load times would be excruciating on the Wii, and the Wii would have to use like a dual-layered DVD sort of situation. The Wii would have been a bad fit for Metroid Dread. The Wii U, I mean, nobody really liked the Wii U, so you had that going for it. So, overall though, yes, it's good that Metroid Dread was released on the Switch. It was well worth the wait. I'm very happy, and for newcomers, you're going to love this game. You may want to look into the little bit of the plot and some of the nuanced details of the plot to get the full impact, but you're going to enjoy the gameplay and the atmosphere. Longtime Metroid fans, there's no excuse not to play this game. And overall, a solid, really amazing, enjoyable experience. It deserves all of the good praise that it's been getting. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Jordan Rolfes from Beagle Rampant Productions. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You know you're the best fans of any YouTuber in the world, and we will catch you later with some more fun, wacky, crazy activities. I'd like to do some more Metroid content. There's definitely going to be some Wagner content coming out this year, and maybe a Tim Burton related video. Those are always fun to do, so we'll catch you guys later with some more fun stuff. Bye!